The lunar surface stretched before Dr. Lam Min Chao like an endless sea of silver dust. Through the reinforced windows of Artemis II Lunar Observatory, Earth hung in the void, a blue marble suspended against infinite blackness. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, her reflection superimposed over her home planet. From this distance, you couldn't see the resource wars, the rising oceans, or the climate refugee camps stretching across former agricultural lands. Earth looked pristine, untouched. Chao turned away from the view and back to her workstation. The quantum processing array hummed softly, monitoring the vast network of deep space receivers that humanity had established throughout the solar system. As lead signal analyst for the International Space Coalition, she had access to more data from the cosmos than any human in history. Another 18-hour shift, Dr. Lam? The voice belonged to Elena Reyes, the encryption specialist whose workstation neighbored Chao's in the observatory's main research bay. The Orion data cluster showed anomalous patterns yesterday, Chao replied, not looking up from her screens. I'm running comprehensive spectrum analysis on the frequency bands. Elena leaned over Chao's shoulder, her long dark hair falling forward. You've been chasing extraterrestrial signals for 3 years. The higher-ups are more interested in mapping mineral deposits on Europa and Titan. Funding for SETI initiatives gets thinner every quarter. Chao sighed. At 34, she had already established herself as one of Earth's premier astronomers, but her obsession with finding intelligent signals from beyond the solar system had become something of a running joke among her colleagues. Most serious scientific attention had turned toward resource exploitation. Humanity's ever-growing appetite demanded new frontiers to consume. There's something there, Elena, Chao said, pulling up a 3-dimensional spectrographic model. Look at these patterns. They're too regular, too persistent to be natural phenomena. Elena studied the display with professional curiosity. Could be interference from the new Chinese mining operations on Phobos. I've filtered for all known human transmissions. This is coming from deep space, specifically from a region near the Orion Nebula. Chao manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on a particular segment of data. The signal repeats on a 127-minute cycle, with micro variations that suggest. She trailed off as a new data stream flooded her screens. The signal had suddenly intensified, becoming clearer than any previous transmission. Both women stared at the display in silence as patterns began to emerge, not random noise, but structured sequences that pulsed with mathematical precision. Run a full-spectrum decrypt, Chao whispered, her heart racing. Priority Alpha. Elena nodded, her previous skepticism forgotten as her fingers flew across her console. Initiating deep pattern recognition protocols. Should we alert Director Novak? Chao hesitated. Director Novak had made it clear that the observatory's resources were to be focused on practical applications, mapping asteroids for mining operations, monitoring solar radiation patterns, and maintaining the communication network for Earth's expanding off-world colonies. Another false alarm would further damage her already fragile professional reputation. Not yet, she decided. Let's confirm we have something substantial first. The quantum processors churned through petabytes of data, searching for meaning in the cosmic transmission. Hours passed, and Chao remained fixated on her screens, watching as the computers attempted to decode the signal using every known mathematical and linguistic framework. At 00347 lunar time, the first patterns emerged. Elena, Chao called, her voice barely above a whisper. Look at this. The patterns weren't simple mathematical sequences as most theoretical first contact protocols suggested. Instead, they contained what appeared to be geometric diagrams interwoven with poetic structures, rhythmic pulses that mimic the cadence of language. "This isn't just a prime number sequence or a physics constant," Elena said, her voice filled with wonder. "There's linguistic complexity here. Whoever sent this, they're trying to communicate ideas, not just announce their existence." Chow nodded, her exhaustion forgotten. "We need to bring in a linguist, and we'll need more computing power to fully analyze these structures." When Director Novak arrived at his office 6 hours later, Chow was waiting with Elena and a complete preliminary report. The director, a tall, austere man with military bearing, listened impassively as Chow outlined their discovery. "So you found another anomalous signal," he said when she finished. "Just like the pulsar echo last year that turned out to be a previously undocumented stellar phenomenon." This is different," Chow insisted. "The pattern complexity suggests deliberate communication. We've eliminated all known natural sources." Novak leaned back in his chair. "Dr. Lam, the Coalition has invested billions in this facility to advance human interests in space. Every hour of quantum computing time costs more than most people earn in a year. I cannot justify allocating significant resources to chase what is, statistically speaking, likely to be background noise." "Sir, with respect, you may continue basic monitoring of the signal," Novak interrupted, "but I won't authorize additional resources until you have something more concrete. The European-Chinese alliance is pushing for access to our lunar helium-3 extraction zones, and Washington wants comprehensive orbital defense simulations by the end of the month." He stood, signaling the end of the discussion. "Those are our priorities." Chow left the director's office, frustration burning in her chest. Politics and resource competition, the same old human stories playing out against the backdrop of space. She had hoped that humanity's reach into the cosmos might have elevated our collective vision, but instead, we had simply expanded our territorial disputes to new frontiers. "He's just following orders from Earth," Elena said as they walked back to the research bay. "The coalition nations are more concerned with maintaining their advantage in the new space economy. Then we'll have to work with what we have." Chow replied, determination hardening her voice. "If we can produce compelling evidence, they'll have to listen." Over the next week, Chow and Elena worked during their designated research hours and then continued analyzing the signal during their personal time. The transmission persisted, maintaining its 127-minute cycle but growing marginally stronger each day, as if whatever was sending it was gradually increasing its power or moving closer. "We need help," Chow admitted after several days of limited progress. "The signal contains structures that go beyond conventional encryption. We need someone who specializes in xenolinguistics and advanced pattern recognition." Elena nodded. "I know someone, Truong Van Huy, an AI linguistics specialist who worked on the Babel protocol for the Vietnamese Space Agency. He's brilliant, unorthodox, but brilliant. Can he be trusted? This needs to stay quiet until we understand what we're dealing with." "Completely. He values scientific discovery above politics. And he owes me a favor." Dr. Truong arrived at Artemis II 3 days later, ostensibly as a consultant for the observatory's translation systems. A slight man with intense eyes and a perpetual look of concentration. He brought with him specialized neural network algorithms designed to identify linguistic patterns in seemingly random data. "Fascinating," he murmured as Chow showed him the signal data they had accumulated. "The structure suggests a multi-layered encoding system, information embedded within information. Like a poem where the first letter of each line forms a separate message." "Can you decode it?" Chow asked. Hui's eyes never left the data streams. "Not immediately, but I can build an adaptive algorithm that might, given enough time and processing power." He glanced up at Chow, which, I understand, is in short supply. We'll find a way, she promised. Their team grew by one more when Elena suggested bringing in Maya Williams, a robotics engineer who maintained the observatory's automated systems. Maya had access to processing nodes throughout the facility and could discreetly allocate computing resources during low-demand periods. I can give you maybe 20% more processing power without raising flags, Maya explained during their first clandestine meeting in Chow's quarters. The engineer was compact and efficient in her movements, with close-cropped hair and hands that never seemed to stop moving. But if Novak or Coalition security notices, we're all in trouble. Or, we understand the risk, Chow said, but this could be the most important discovery in human history. Maya studied Chow for a long moment. You really believe that? I do. Well, I've always wanted to be part of First Contact, Maya said with a slight smile. Even if it costs me my job. The team established a routine, working in shifts to maintain continuous analysis of the signal while avoiding detection by observatory administration. They used Maya's access to distribute the computational load across multiple systems, disguising their activities as routine maintenance and system diagnostics. 3 weeks into their covert operation, Hui's linguistic algorithms produced the first breakthrough. Look at this, he said, pulling the team together in the small storage room they had converted into an unofficial workspace. When we apply the quantum decoherence filter to the signal and then run it through the pattern recognition matrix, this emerges. On his display appeared a complex spiral structure that resembled DNA but with unfamiliar branching patterns and connection points. Is that a biological molecule? Maya asked, leaning closer. Not exactly, Hui replied. It's more like a schematic, a blueprint, but it incorporates elements that resemble molecular structures, mathematical constants, and what might be linguistic components. A language based on biological processes. Chow breathed, her mind racing with possibilities. Or a way to communicate across species barriers by referencing universal biological principles. Elena frowned. But this structure, it's not like any DNA I've ever seen. The helical pattern is similar, but these branches here and here. She pointed to several junctures in the spiral. They form impossible connections, at least according to our understanding of biochemistry. Maybe not impossible, Chow said, just beyond our current science. They worked for days to extract more information from the spiral structure, gradually piecing together what appeared to be a message encoded within its complex geometry. Hui's algorithms identified recurring patterns that could represent words or concepts, while Elena developed encryption protocols that mirrored the signal's structure to test potential decoding methods. As they made progress, Chow became increasingly aware of subtle changes in the observatory's atmosphere. Security personnel were more visible in the research areas, and several times she noticed technicians performing routine diagnostics on systems near their workstations. Someone had noticed their unauthorized use of computing resources. Her suspicions were confirmed when Director Novak summoned her to his office again. Dr. Lam, he said without preamble, our security protocols have detected unusual access patterns across multiple systems. Care to explain? Chow had prepared for this moment. We've been running extended analysis on stellar formation in the Orion region. The distributed processing approach allows us to work without disrupting primary observatory functions. Novak's expression remained impassive. And you felt no need to request proper authorization for this research? Given our previous conversation, I assumed permission for basic continued research was implied as long as it didn't interfere with priority operations. I see. Novak tapped his desk thoughtfully. Are you aware that representatives from the North American Alliance and the Euro-Asian Economic Consortium have been inquiring about unusual signal activity detected by their own deep space arrays? Activity originating from the same region of space you're so interested in. Chow's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. That's interesting. Perhaps they've detected the same stellar phenomena. Perhaps, Novak leaned forward. Dr. Lamb, I've reviewed your file. Your work before joining the coalition was exemplary. Your analysis of gravitational wave patterns led to breakthroughs in interplanetary navigation. Your talents are wasted chasing ghost signals. Sir, let me finish. Whatever you and your colleagues are working on, it has attracted attention from multiple global powers. If there is something significant in that data, it will become a political and potentially military issue. Do you understand what I'm saying? Chow understood perfectly. Any confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence would trigger geopolitical earthquakes as nations scrambled to control the information and any technology that might be derived from it. We're simply pursuing scientific inquiry, she said carefully. Nothing is simply scientific when it involves potential first contact. Novak replied, You have 48 hours to present a complete report on your findings. After that, all your research will be transferred to Coalition Security for evaluation. His tone softened slightly. This isn't personal, Dr. Lamb, but there are protocols for these situations. As Chow left the director's office, she knew their small window of independent research was closing fast. Once Coalition Security took over, the scientific pursuit would become secondary to political and military considerations. She gathered her team in their makeshift lab, relaying Novak's ultimatum. 48 hours, Elena repeated. That's not enough time to complete the decryption. Then we accelerate. Chow said firmly. Maya, we need maximum processing power. Security protocols be damned at this point. Elena, focus on the recurring patterns in the third spiral sequence. They seem to contain temporal references. Hui, your linguistic matrix is starting to show coherent structures. Push it further. And what will you do? Maya asked. Chow straightened her shoulders. I'm going to prepare our findings for publication on the Open Scientific Network. If Coalition Security takes control, this discovery could be buried for decades. The world deserves to know. They worked without breaks, pushing themselves and the observatory systems to their limits. As hours passed, more pieces of the cosmic puzzle fell into place. The spiral structure contained embedded sequences that, when properly aligned, revealed what appeared to be a star map, celestial coordinates pointing to a specific region of space. More disturbing were the temporal references Elena had identified. They formed a countdown sequence, though to what remained unclear. These numerical sequences, Elena explained, pointing to a series of embedded codes, they appear to function as a chronological index. If our interpretation is correct, they're counting down to something, and the reference point appears to correlate to Earth years. How much time? Chow asked, her throat dry. Elena hesitated. If we've decoded this correctly, 7 Earth years from now, 2082. The team fell silent, contemplating the implications. A countdown sent from deep space, targeted specifically at our solar system. There's more, Hui said, breaking the tension. I've isolated what I believe to be linguistic components within the signal. They don't translate directly into any human language, but the structural patterns suggest concepts. He brought up a new display showing clusters of symbols. This recurring pattern here appears in conjunction with references to the star map and the temporal countdown. Based on contextual analysis, it might represent danger or warning. A warning about what? Maya asked. Before anyone could respond, The lab door slid open, revealing Director Novak flanked by two security officers. "Dr. Lamb," he said, his voice cold, "your access to observatory systems has been revoked, effective immediately. Coalition security is assuming control of your research." Chow stepped forward. "Director, we've made significant breakthroughs. The signal contains coordinates and what appears to be a warning. We need more time to—" "That decision is no longer yours to make," Novak interrupted. "All data and research materials are now classified under Coalition Security Protocol 7 Alpha. He turned to the security officers. "Secure all devices and escort Dr. Lamb and her team to the residential section. They are restricted from all research areas pending investigation." As the security officers moved to comply, an alert sounded from Hui's console. Everyone turned to see new data flooding the screens. The signal had intensified dramatically, pulsing with unprecedented clarity. "It's changing," Hui said, his professional composure momentarily broken. "The pattern is evolving, becoming more complex." Despite the security officers' presence, they all stared at the display as new structures emerged from the cosmic transmission, more detailed, more urgent. The spiral pattern expanded, revealing layers of information previously hidden within the signal's complexity. In that moment, Chow made a decision. She activated the emergency protocol she had prepared, sending their accumulated research to secure servers outside the observatory's control. A simple gesture, touching 3 points on her personal device in sequence, but it might preserve their discoveries regardless of what happened next. "Director," she said, turning to Novak, "I understand the security concerns, but this is bigger than politics. Something is trying to communicate with humanity, and I believe it's warning us about a threat. We need to understand this message before it's too late." Novak's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or a glimmer of scientific curiosity not entirely smothered by bureaucratic duty. "You'll have your chance to make that case to Coalition Security," he said finally. "For now, you're all confined to quarters." As they were escorted from the lab, Chow caught Elena's eye and nodded slightly. The encryption specialist would understand. Their research was safe, transmitted to trusted colleagues who would continue their work beyond the Coalition's reach. Whatever happened now, the signal would not be silenced. In the days that followed, Artemis II became a center of frantic activity. Additional security personnel arrived from Earth, along with specialists from various Coalition intelligence agencies. Chow and her team remained confined to the residential section, isolated from each other and from observatory operations. During her isolation, Chow reflected on what had driven her to this point, her lifelong search for meaning beyond Earth, intensified by personal tragedy. 12 years earlier, she had lost her parents and younger brother to the catastrophic Mekong Delta floods, one of many climate disasters that had reshaped Earth's geopolitical landscape. That loss had fueled her determination to look beyond humanity's self-destructive patterns, to find wisdom among the stars. On the 5th day of her confinement, Chow received an unexpected visitor, Maya Williams, escorted by a security officer who remained by the door. "You have 10 minutes, the officer said curtly. When the door closed, Maya spoke in a low, urgent voice. "They're bringing in military cryptographers and xenobiologists from Earth. The signal has continued to intensify, and similar transmissions have been detected by observatories throughout the solar system. It's becoming impossible to contain." "What about our research?" Chow asked. "The data you transmitted made it out. There's a group of independent scientists working with it now." Maya glanced at the door. "But there's something else you should know. Before they restricted my access, I discovered unusual activity in the observatory's communication systems. Someone was transmitting large data packets to an external network not affiliated with the coalition. A security breach? Maya nodded. I think someone else has been monitoring the signal, possibly for longer than we have. And I don't think they're sharing what they've found. Before Chow could respond, the door opened and the security officer signaled that their time was up. As Maya was escorted out, she whispered, "Trust your instincts." Alone again. Chow processed this new information. If Maya was right, others had been aware of the signal before their discovery. Others who preferred to work in secret, away from scientific scrutiny or public knowledge. 2 more days passed before Chow was finally summoned to meet with coalition officials. She was escorted to the observatory's secure conference room, where Director Novak waited alongside 3 individuals she didn't recognize, 2 men and a woman, all wearing the subtle insignia of coalition security. "Dr. Lamb," the woman began without introduction. "I am Executive Director Kaminsky of Coalition Special Sciences Division. These are my colleagues, Dr. Abernathy and Commander Richards." She gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Chow remained standing. "I'd like to know the status of my colleagues first." "They are being debriefed separately," Kaminsky replied, her tone neutral. "Now, please sit. We have much to discuss." Reluctantly, Chow took the offered seat. Director Novak avoided her gaze, staring at the table with uncharacteristic discomfort. "We've reviewed your research on the Orion signal." Kaminsky continued. "Your work is impressive, if somewhat unorthodox in methodology." "Thank you," Chow replied cautiously. "However, we believe your interpretation of the signal contains significant errors." Kaminsky activated the room's display system, bringing up familiar data patterns, Chow's own research, but subtly altered. "Our analysis suggests the transmission is not a warning, but rather a beacon, possibly an automated distress call from a damaged probe or vessel." Chow frowned. "That contradicts our findings. The temporal elements clearly indicate—" "Dr. Lamb," Abernathy interrupted, speaking for the first time. The physicist's voice was smooth, reasonable. "We've subjected the signal to the most advanced analytical tools available to the coalition. The pattern you identified as a countdown is more likely a navigational reference point, a pulsar timing sequence used for interstellar positioning." "I disagree," Chow said firmly. "The contextual elements, particularly when aligned with the linguistic markers Dr. Truong identified, strongly suggest a warning about a specific future event." Commander Richards leaned forward. "Dr. Lamb, you must understand the sensitivity of this situation. Preliminary reports of your findings have already leaked to certain scientific communities. There are concerns about public panic if unverified interpretations spread." "Unverified?" Chow couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "We applied rigorous scientific protocols to our analysis, with limited resources and unauthorized access." Kaminsky pointed out, "The coalition cannot base its official position on such compromised research." Chow looked around the table, suddenly understanding. "You're going to suppress our findings." "We're establishing an official investigative committee," Kaminsky corrected. "All research will be properly channeled through appropriate security and scientific protocols. In the meantime, no unauthorized information about the signal will be released." "And if I disagree with this approach?" Commander Richards answered, his tone hardening. "Then you would be in violation of your contractual obligations to the coalition, with all attendant consequences." The threat was clear. Chow looked at Director Novak, who finally met her gaze. "Dr. Lamb," he said quietly, "cooperation is the wisest course here. The committee will include qualified scientists. The truth will emerge, but through proper channels. Chow understood the political realities at play. The coalition, representing the uneasy alliance of Earth's major powers, operated on consensus and compromise. Any discovery with potentially destabilizing implications would be carefully managed or buried if necessary. "May I be excused?" she asked, her mind already racing with possibilities. Kaminsky nodded. "You'll remain at Artemis II for now. We'll have more questions as our analysis progresses." As Chow left the conference room, she knew with certainty that the official investigation would move at a glacial pace, weighted down by political considerations and security protocols. Meanwhile, the countdown, whatever it signified, continued. Back in her quarters, Chow found a message waiting on her personal device, cleverly disguised as a system update notification. It was from Elena, somehow bypassing the communications restrictions. "Data secure, independent analysis proceeding. Key sequence identified in third helical structure, reference to cyclical extinction event and third threshold, Earth. Stay strong. We're not alone." Chow's heart raced as she read the message. Cyclical extinction event. The phrase resonated with terrible clarity. If their interpretation was correct, the signal wasn't just a warning. It was a message from someone who had witnessed or survived something similar before, something now threatening Earth. The next week passed in a blur of official interviews and tightly controlled research sessions. Chow was allowed limited access to the signal data, but always under supervision and using only approved analytical tools. She played along, knowing that Elena and their network of independent scientists were making more progress outside the coalition's restrictions. Then came the attack. It began with subtle system malfunctions throughout Artemis II, environmental controls fluctuating, communication systems experiencing momentary outages. At first, observatory staff attributed these to routine technical issues, but when the primary research databases began experiencing massive data corruption, it became clear that something more sinister was occurring. Chow was in her quarters when the emergency alarm sounded. Moments later, her door unlocked automatically, standard protocol during environmental emergencies to prevent residents from being trapped. She stepped into the corridor to find confusion and panic as staff rushed to emergency stations. Taking advantage of the chaos, Chow made her way to the research bay. The central systems were in lockdown, but she found Maya at an auxiliary control station, frantically working to isolate critical systems. "It's a coordinated cyber attack," Maya explained without looking up from her console. "Someone's trying to erase all data related to the signal. Not just corrupt it, completely eliminate it from our systems." "Coalition security?" Chow asked, though she suspected otherwise. Maya shook her head. "Too sophisticated. This is military-grade intrusion software with adaptive algorithms I've never seen before." She paused, her fingers hovering over the controls. "I managed to track the origin before our countermeasures engaged. It's coming from multiple sources, but the primary attack vector traces back to servers owned by Aegis Corporation. Aegis, the world's largest military technology conglomerate, with close ties to several coalition member states. They specialized in advanced weapons systems and, more recently, space-based defense infrastructure." "Why would Aegis target our research?" Chow wondered aloud, though a suspicion was already forming in her mind. "Because they know what the signal means," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Hui standing in the doorway, his usual composed demeanor replaced by urgent intensity. "And they don't want anyone else to know." "How did you—" "Emergency protocols," he said dismissively. "Listen, I've been continuing analysis on restricted terminals. and I've identified another layer of the message. The signal isn't just warning about an extinction event, it's identifying the cause. He held up a small data crystal. It's all here, the complete decryption. Maya's console erupted with new alerts. They're breaking through the secondary firewalls. We have minutes, maybe less, before they reach the core data archives. Chow made a swift decision. Maya, can you establish a secure link to the global science network? We need to broadcast what we've found before it's erased. In the middle of a cyber attack? Maya paused, then nodded grimly. Actually, that might work. They're so focused on getting in that they might not notice data going out through emergency channels. Do it, Chow ordered. Turning to Hui, she asked, what exactly did you find? Hui inserted the data crystal into a portable terminal, bringing up complex visualizations. The signal contains detailed stellar coordinates and temporal markers. It's not just pointing to a location in space, it's indicating a path through space-time, leading to a structure of some kind. He manipulated the display, zooming in on a particular sequence. And there's this. The screen showed a stark numerical readout. 0 Klasok. The countdown ends in 2082 as we thought, Hui explained. But it's not counting down to an arrival or an attack. It's marking the beginning of a process, the same process that apparently destroyed whoever sent this message. What process? Chow asked, though she feared she already knew. Technological self-destruction, Hui said simply. The message describes a pattern repeated across multiple civilizations, a point where technological advancement outpaces ethical constraints, leading to catastrophic collapse. The sender experienced this themselves and established automated warning beacons near systems showing similar development patterns. They're warning us that we're about to destroy ourselves. Chow whispered. Exactly. And someone doesn't want that warning received. Hui's expression darkened. The coordinates lead to what appears to be a biological repository, possibly containing information about the sender's civilization and others that followed the same path to destruction. Maya called from her station. I've established a partial link to external networks, but it's unstable. Whatever you want to send, do it now. Chow took the data crystal from Hui and connected it to Maya's terminal. Transmit everything, the complete signal analysis, Hui's decryption, all of it. That violates about a dozen security protocols, Maya warned, though her fingers were already preparing the transmission. So does trying to erase evidence of first contact, Chow replied. Do it. As Maya initiated the transmission, the lights in the research bay flickered, then dimmed to emergency levels. Moments later, Director Novak rushed in, accompanied by security personnel. Stop that transmission immediately, he ordered, his composure finally broken. Chow stood her ground. It's too late, Director. The truth is already out there. Novak's face contorted with rage and fear. You have no idea what you've done. The implications are exactly why this can't be suppressed. Chow interrupted. This isn't just scientific discovery. It's a warning humanity needs to hear. Before Novak could respond, a new alert sounded throughout the observatory. A breach in the environmental systems. Oxygen levels were dropping throughout the facility. They're trying to force an evacuation. Maya realized, clear the observatory so they can complete the data purge without witnesses. All personnel to emergency shelters. Novak ordered the security team. Initiate full evacuation protocols. As the security officers hurried to comply, Novak turned back to Chow, his expression unreadable. This isn't over. Dr. Lam. No, she agreed. It's just beginning. In the hours that followed, Artemis II descended into controlled chaos. emergency systems engaged, sealing critical areas and preparing the facility for possible depressurization. Staff gathered in designated safety zones, waiting for evacuation shuttles from Earth. Chow, Hui, and Maya remained in a secondary control room, monitoring the ongoing cyber attack and trying to salvage what data they could. Elena joined them after escaping her own confinement during the emergency. "The transmission made it out," Elena confirmed. "I've received confirmation from contacts in the European Science Directorate. They've secured the data and are already distributing it through secure academic networks." "What about the attack?" Chow asked. "Still ongoing, but focused on observatory systems now," Maya reported. "They're trying to erase all evidence that the signal ever existed." "Too late for that," Hui said with grim satisfaction. "Once information enters the global scientific community, it can't be contained." Chow nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Now we need to understand what happens next. If the warning is accurate, we have 7 years before reaching the threshold it describes. Assuming we've interpreted the temporal markers correctly," Elena cautioned. "There's another problem," Maya said, looking up from her console. "Coalition security vessels are approaching lunar orbit. Official reason is emergency evacuation, but their deployment pattern suggests they're preparing to secure the facility, possibly by force." Chow wasn't surprised. The coalition would want to contain the situation, control the narrative. "How long until they arrive?" 3 hours, maybe less. Chow made a decision. "We need to gather all the physical evidence we can, backup data crystals, original research notes, anything that can't be altered or erased. When the security forces arrive, they'll confiscate everything." The team worked quickly, collecting what physical evidence remained and preparing detailed statements of their findings. Chow recorded a personal message explaining their discoveries and the circumstances surrounding them, including the apparent attempt by Aegis Corporation to suppress the information. As they worked, Chow contemplated the implications of what they had discovered. If the signal was correct, humanity stood at the edge of the same abyss that had claimed other civilizations, a point where technology, resource depletion, and social division created conditions for collapse. The warning hadn't come from hostile aliens, but from the ghosts of those who had walked this path before. When coalition security forces finally arrived, Chow and her team surrendered without resistance. They were separated, interrogated, and eventually transported back to Earth as persons of interest in a case involving unauthorized data transmission and security breaches. But the information they had released could not be contained. Within days, scientific institutions worldwide were analyzing the signal data, confirming the team's findings and expanding upon them. Public knowledge of the message spread despite official attempts to downplay its significance or question its authenticity. Aegis Corporation denied any involvement in the cyber attack on Artemis II, though investigative journalists soon uncovered connections between the company and a shadowy research initiative called Threshold Analysis, a program apparently dedicated to studying technological extinction events similar to those described in the signal. For 3 months, Chow remained in coalition custody, isolated from her colleagues and from the scientific community's response to their discovery. She was permitted no outside communication and given only selective information about ongoing events. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, her confinement ended. She was released without formal charges, though with strict limitations on her future scientific activities and a lifetime ban from coalition space facilities. The world she returned to had changed. The revelation of an extraterrestrial warning, confirmed now by multiple independent scientific bodies, had created a global paradigm shift. Nations that had been racing to exploit space resources were now facing public pressure to address the warning's implications. New international initiatives formed to investigate the coordinates contained in the signal and to reassess humanity's technological trajectory. Chow found Elena, Hui, and Maya waiting for her upon her release. They too had been released, though under similar restrictions. They couldn't contain it, Elena explained as they sat in a quiet cafe in Singapore, one of the floating cities built to withstand rising sea levels. Too many people have the data now, too many independent confirmations. They've shifted to damage control instead of suppression. What about Aegis? Chow asked. Facing international investigations, Hui replied. Evidence emerged that they detected similar signals years ago and developed a private research program based on the findings. They were trying to weaponize the knowledge to gain technological advantage from the warning rather than address its actual message. Maya sipped her tea thoughtfully. The real question is what happens now. The countdown continues, whether we acknowledge it or not. Chow looked out at the floating city, one of humanity's adaptive responses to climate disaster. It represented both our capacity for innovation and our tendency to address symptoms rather than causes. Now we have a choice, she said. We can ignore the warning and continue on our current path, or we can learn from those who came before us. Do you think we can change? Elena asked. Break the cycle they described? Chow considered the question carefully. The signal had described a pattern repeated across multiple civilizations, a point where technological capability outpaced wisdom, where resource consumption reached unsustainable levels, where societies fractured under the weight of their own contradictions. I think we have to try, she said finally. That's why they sent the warning, not just to document our end, but to offer us a chance they might not have had, the chance to see the pattern before it's too late. 3 weeks later, Chow received an unexpected invitation to address a special session of the United Nations General Assembly, despite her recent status as a security risk. Global public opinion had transformed her and her team into symbols of scientific integrity against political suppression. Standing before representatives of Earth's nations, Chow spoke not just as a scientist, but as a witness to something profound. The message we received is not just a warning about our future, she told the assembly. It's a reminder that we are not the first to face these challenges. The coordinates contained in the signal point to a repository of information, perhaps the last legacy of civilizations that reached this same threshold and failed to overcome it. She paused, looking out at the assembly. I propose an international mission to those coordinates, not as competing nations seeking advantage, but as representatives of humanity seeking wisdom. Whatever awaits us there might hold the key to breaking the cycle of technological self-destruction that has claimed others before us. The proposal, dubbed Project Beacon, gained immediate support from scientific communities worldwide, even some coalition nations, recognizing the political benefits of supporting such a popular initiative. Pledged resources and expertise. 1 year after the signal's discovery, Chow stood on the observation deck of the Resilience, Earth's most advanced interstellar probe, preparing for its launch toward the coordinates contained in the message. The mission would take decades to reach its destination, but its very existence represented a new direction for humanity, a willingness to listen rather than merely exploit, to learn rather than conquer. Elena, Hui, and Maya stood beside her, all 4 now key members of the international team overseeing Project Beacon. They had overcome attempts to silence them, political opposition, and the inertia of human short-sightedness to reach this moment. Do you think we'll succeed where they failed? Elena asked quietly as they watched final preparations for the launch. Chow considered the question. The signal had described a pattern repeated across cosmic time, civilizations reaching a critical threshold where their technology, resource consumption, and social divisions created conditions for collapse. But the very existence of the warning suggested something else: hope. Someone had cared enough to leave a message for those who might follow, a chance to break the cycle. "I don't know," Chow admitted, "but for the first time, we're asking the right questions, and that's where change begins." As the countdown to launch began, Chow thought about the other countdown, the one embedded in the signal, marking humanity's approach to the same threshold that had claimed civilizations before us. We had 7 years remaining to change course, to prove that we could overcome the patterns that had defined our history. The Resilience lifted off in a column of light, carrying humanity's response to a message from the depths of space and time, not defiance or denial, but acknowledgement and a question in return. How do we break the cycle? The answer, if it existed, lay waiting in the stars. And for the first time in human history, we were truly listening.